Hi, in this video, we want to take a look at plotting points on our leaflet map when we're using R. Okay, so we're in a situation that I want to have individual data points where I have latitude and longitude, and I want to slap down some information along with that dot. I want to convey some data information that I have. So let's say that I've got the address of a location. I want to put that into my map. Or maybe on a little dot, I want to put in how old the building is, or some categorical feature or a numeric value of my data connected to the location that I'm plotting on my map. All right, this is a really effective way to get information to your stakeholders. Now, remember, maps are one of the most effective ways to get data visualization where people will really buy into what you're putting out there. Now, the funny thing about this is that other visualization and data presentation methods will be just as informative, but people feel like it's more informative when it comes from a map. So exploit this as a data scientist whenever you can. If you have latitude and longitude and you have data, slap that on there. Okay, so let's go ahead and start doing an example. All right, so first and foremost, I'm going to load my package. I'm just using the leaflet package for this. So remember, the leaflet package is designed for interactive maps. And we'll be, in future videos, we'll be getting into more interactive features. For right now, I'm just going to be plotting points and looking at it that way. All right, so let's do a quick example where I'm going to slap down some markers and some boundaries. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and plot some points around UCF. I'm going to use the Stamen as my map. And the reason why I'm doing this is because it's black, white, and gray. And so when I put down colors, those colors are easier to make them pop. You know, I want my reader to look at those instead of some feature of the map. And I'm setting the view and the zoom. So here I played around and found exactly where UCF is located. And then I'm setting some boundaries. And now I'm actually plotting the map. So all this builds the map. And then this plots it for me. And notice that I'm using piping notation. If I wanted to, I could keep using, if I wanted to modify this, I could use piping again later on, you know, if I want to change things up. All right, so here's my map, no markers, but this is what I'm looking at. So now let's go ahead and put some data on there. So I'm going to need latitude, longitude. You know, I can put markers around. Now, if I want information on there, I need some data to slap in. So I'm going to call it the label. And here's our longitude, our latitude label. And you'll notice that I'm just going to do piping with that base map I already built. And I'm going to add markers. Okay, so now let's take a look at what I have. Okay, so you'll notice there is a stadium. So when I put in label, when I hover over it, it pops up, or it appears for me whenever I use label. If I have this parameter, if I put pop up instead, I have to do some clicking. All right, so now one thing that we're going to need if we're building interactive maps, we need the ability to control what's on there and what's not. So one thing that will be very useful while I'm developing a more complicated interactive map is that I'll have some data, some latitudes and longitudes, some coordinates that I want to slap down here because it's pertinent to what I want to show the user. But at times I want other data to be slapped on there also. And so maybe I want both, I want one, I want the other. So clearing the information that I've already put on there is going to be important to make sure that I don't overcrowd things as things go on. So one thing I can do, I can clear the boundary. So if I'm trying to control the boundary of what's going on, I can use clear bounds to set it up so that the boundary restrictions are gone. And so now I can see the same map, but my viewing boundary is a little bit different. Now notice, all right, so here I've got in the original map, I've got boundaries set to this. And if I do this, it'll shift back to be within the boundary. All right. Now, after I clear the bounds, notice what happens when I move things around. It just stays put. It doesn't snap back because I cleared that boundary. All right, now I can clear the markers with clear markers. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Now you'll notice when I do this, it moves back over to where it wants it to within the boundaries that I've already set. And I can use the boundaries to force the user to keep focused in the area I want them to. Also, if I don't do that, you know, they start playing around, they might get lost from where my data actually is plotted. And now here's what happens if I clear both. So notice I can use clear markers and clear bounds, and that wipes out what I had on there. All right. So now let's go a little bit deeper into applying some points. So the previous examples, I only had 3 points I was applying on there. I want to do something a little bit juicier, a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and load some data. I'm going to use the Breweries 91 data set, which is in the leaflet package. And so I'm going to grab that data. Now, something I'm going to do, if you look at that data set, it has latitude and longitude together in one column. And I don't want it that way. I want it in a standard data frame format. That way it's easier to work with. So to work with this, what I did was I used the SP package and coordinates, and then I extracted the coordinates out of there. So by doing this command, it goes in and it finds the latitude, longitude, single column and breaks it up into multiple columns. Now, something that was kind of weird about it is that it actually gave me 4 columns. It repeated the latitude and repeated the longitude twice, but it's not really a big deal. Doesn't cause a problem for me. Now, the next thing I did was I changed latitude to lat and longitude to LNG just to be consistent with leaflet. Honestly, I didn't need this. It just makes the upcoming code, the keywords match up perfectly with the column names as I do this. But I could proceed without this step here. All right, now something I'm going to do in a moment is I'm going to start coloring my points. Now, coloring a map is a great way to lie with statistics. I shouldn't say great, I should say an effective way to lie with statistics. Okay, we have multiple math tactics for coloring a map. Okay, so let's say that I could go up and I could just go off of intervals. Let's say I'm going to take my data. Let's say my data is skew right. I'm going to walk up and I'm going to have equal intervals. So I'm going to take the range of my data, I chop it up into 3, and I'll go red, yellow, green, you know, just like a stoplight. And red is bad, green is good, yellow is in the middle. Now, if I have constant intervals, well, what's going to end up happening is we're going to have like a very few of the values will be green if it's skewed right, if I do it like that. Now, that's because if I'm skewed right, the values that are far to the right on the number line, there aren't very many of them. Everything is clumped up more on the left-hand side. Now, if I was to use quantiles or quartiles, let's say I use quantiles to break it up into thirds, then I'll have an equal proportion of each of those bins. Okay. Well, then what's going to end up happening is that I'll have a lot more green because a third of them will be green off of that. While previously, very few would be green. So if I am, let's say that I am running for sheriff And I want to show that the incumbent is, I'm not the incumbent. I want to show the incumbent is not doing its job. Well, I'm going to pick the coloring scheme that puts on more red on the map. Now, if I'm the incumbent, I'm going to take a different coloring algorithm that puts less red on the map. That way I look better. And honestly, I have looked through, different websites like security companies, for like when I was purchasing the alarm system to get a reduction on my house insurance, my home insurance. I was looking at different companies and I looked at their crime maps, and I looked at it and I went, hey, yeah, they're doing exactly that. They make every neighborhood they can look red, even though it's a valid method of coloring, but clearly they were choosing a coloring method that made neighborhoods look scarier than they really are. Why? Because that's good for their business. Okay, so if I want to do constant interval width, where each coloring group gets the same width to it, I want color numeric, where it's, now this will actually be a gradient, but it'll be a constant gradient. If I want to do binning, I'll use color bin. So this will be similar to binning for histograms. Now the default for this is to use the pretty binning package in R. If you don't like that, you can just put pretty equals false and it'll use a different method. There's the quantile method. And so all of these rely on me using numeric data. All right, so here this is like an even gradient. Here this is based off of quantiles. And this one is, you think of it as histogram bins. Now the next one is for categorical data. So I have categorical data, and here for this one, it's which village is the brewery in. And I go ahead and I take the village information. I went ahead and I created a table. And for me, I like to sort it so that I have the more frequent ones on the left and the less frequent ones on the right whenever I'm dealing with a factor. That's just something I found works very well when I'm plotting for stakeholders. And so I set that up. And so then I went through, I used the Veridis color palette to select points. All right, so what's going on here is that the village that has the most breweries gets this color, and this one has the second most, third most, and so on. All of these breweries are the only breweries in their town. And so I have color corresponding to the village, but when there's only one brewery in the village, I put them all at that color. I think that's a yellow. And you'll notice I used levels just like in factor in the R package in base R. All right, so now let's just use different markings. So first and foremost, I can go ahead and I can go with just add markers. And you'll notice when I scroll over, the name of it automatically appears. Very nice. Now if I want to do pop-ups, notice that instead, so previously I had label, and I just scrolled over. If I don't want to automatically appear, I want the user to have to click on it, I do pop-up like that. Oh, something I want to point out is you'll notice that we have tilde notation going on. So I don't have to use the full data frame inside my command. I don't have to do breweries 91 $LNG for longitude. I can just go tilde LNG because the data is already declared inside the leaflet function. Now, if I want to pull in a separate data set and do this, One thing that I could do is I could declare data inside add markers and then use this. Or what I could do is I could actually specify an entire vector as long as it is sufficient length and use $ notation to be able to subset things. And this is a very good way for me to, let's say I want a certain type of data corresponding to this type of marker, a certain type of data corresponding to another marker. I can use like the $ notation to take control of that very nicely. All right, so I can also mark with circles. Now, something about this is that I can control the radius. You'll notice this is rather small, and I've got these throughout. Now, the default colors I really don't like, but the default colors are good for maps in that I can see through it. So I can see what's on the other side. I can still read, which town or which village, these dots are coming from. Also, because of the opacity, when they're overlapped, I can see that I have more than one dot in that location. If I had just a solid color, I wouldn't be able to realize it when I have overlapping dots. Now, label only, it's here, this just gives us more control if I wanted to, be able to fine tune things, but I can't spot where the label is just going through. Let's see if I can get lucky. I had them for a brief moment. Oh, there we go. There we go. Able to find it. So it's there, it's just hard to see. And I could use that with different types of markers if I wanted to start using multiple functions at the same time. Now let's get into coloring our points. So the first option I have is to have everything with the same color. Well, to do that, all I do is I just say color equals the color I want. All right, easy peasy lemon squeezy. Now here, if I want a constant interval for a gradient effect, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the color numeric function. So this was declared earlier. So let me go back up to this. Each of these are defining a function, and in that function, I pass in data, and then what happens is that the color numeric or color bin, color quantile figures out what's going to happen. So the output here is a function where I have to pass in data. The output here is a function where I have to pass in data. The function here, I have to pass in data. And same thing for this one. All right, so that's something to keep mindful of as we look through these. All right, so you'll notice I have a tilde going on here. And I'm passing in the data this way. And just to demonstrate, I'm using $ notation on this one, just so that we can see how I actually want to execute that when I want to pass something into my function. All right, and we can scroll through. And remember, I used red and blue as my colors. Something to notice is that the gray, you notice that I have an NA in the information. That's because the year that it was founded is not available in the data sets. And so here, color is corresponding to how old the brewery is. So here, this one is red and it's 1422. This one is dark blue and it's 2008. So we can see that the redder the point is, the older the brewery, the bluer it is, the newer the brewery. So if I was, I could use this map to give me let's say that I want to be a beer tourist. I could go to the breweries that are older if I feel like the older ones are more interested. If I want to see how, the new kids on the block are doing it, I'll go to the blue ones. Now here, I've got a very similar approach, but now I'm using color bin to bin the colors. And so you'll notice that there's very few red, very few blue on here. And that's because of how spread out the data is. So there's 2008, 2005. Now the red, 1498, 1422, and I have a lot of stuff in the middle. Now for quantile, here it's going to be working to try and have an equal proportion of colors. So I want to have as many blues as I have reds in this one. And you'll notice I've got like a darker purple, or a bluer purple. I have a redder purple, I have blue, and I have red. I have 4 colors and approximately an equal proportion of each. I can zoom in, get a better idea, study the map so I can drive there. Now, if I want to color by factor level, all right, I can do that also. Oh, something I want to point out that I forgot to point out a moment ago. Notice that here on this one, I have a tilde in front of the paste, and I'm not using $ notation. So here I have tilde paste, then the data fields I want in there, in the paste function. Up here, I'm using no tilde, and I'm using $ notation. So I can, this gives me more programming flexibility in how to do this. If I want to pull in like a separate data set in for things, like I could subset the data, then put it in there. Here, this is an easier code to read, but if I'm using tilde notation, I don't have as much flexibility. Do whatever works best for your project. Now I want to color by factor level. Now, to show a little bit of difference, I went ahead and changed some parameters. So once again, I'm using, the color palette that I created. Remember, this is a function that I created. Now here, I'm changing the opacity and the fill opacity. All right, so what I want to do, I want to make my point absolutely pop out with that color. Now, having my points so I can see through them, that's good for being able to see the map on the other side, if that's a good idea for my situation. Also makes it easier to see if I have overlapping points. Disadvantage is that the points don't pop out as much. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure that I have solid colors and you can't see through the dots. Okay. And this is something that I personally prefer to do professionally. But then again, on my work, I usually don't have like overlapping locations. Now, something you should always do, and I skipped doing it in the other ones just to keep the code cleaner and easier to read, is you should add a legend. And for this, I'm going to go ahead and put in my color palette that I've got going on. Here are the villages I have. I'm going to put a title for my legend, the location of my legends, and the opacity. And so now I can see what each of these have going on. And all right, so, and down here, I can see what's going on. Now this got trimmed off. I didn't catch that until just now, that my legend got trimmed off. So I definitely would want to move my legend to the right-hand side. Now, but too late, I'm filming the video. But all I would have to do is change this to top right, and everything would work out great. All right, well, that's all I've got for you. Take care and goodbye.